Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Another round of storms soaking California in recent days and days ahead. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Coming up, we're going to ask local experts what effect all of this rain and snow will have on the drought. But first, let's begin our coverage with Mike Valerio with a roundup of some of the issues this latest storm is causing.
Along California's iconic Pacific Coast Highway just south of San Francisco, the beach battered by this latest bomb cyclone. Rescuers in the Bay Area extending a lifeline 30 feet as two people trapped in their flooded SUV climbed to safety.
If they didn't get out, it could have been bad consequences. They could have been trapped in the trees and possibly drowned.
Powerful wind gusts toppled the roof of a Valero station, and a toddler is dead after a redwood tree fell onto a home in Sonoma County.
When I first arrived on scene, a frantic father came out of the house holding the child. He was kind of covered in debris, and he said, "My child's not breathing."
The damage extending to now soaked Southern California. Near Malibu, a rock slide left boulders in the roadway and closed State Route 23, while in West Hollywood, trees came crashing down.
I just heard this noise and couldn't tell what direction it was coming from and came outside and saw that the tree was down.
For the first time since May of last year, California does not have any exceptional drought, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor. But dry conditions for so long have made the Golden State especially vulnerable when a parade of Pacific storms delivers.
It's great because we need the rain, but when it comes down so much all at one time, the water has nowhere to go. The ground's already saturated, and so it causes these really unsafe environments.
In Los Angeles, Mike Valerio, KPBS News.
And it's been a wet winter so far in San Diego, but with all of the rain and the snow here and across California, you might be wondering if we're getting close to ending the drought. KPBS reporter John Carroll says that answer depends on how you define a drought.
In Wednesday's San Jose Mercury News, a San Diegan made a statement that's getting a lot of attention in drought-stricken California.
My name's Marty Ralph. I'm the director of the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes at Scripps Institution of Oceanography.
In regard to our recent wet weather, Ralph, a leading expert on atmospheric rivers, told the newspaper that if these storms continue to come on shore for the next 2 or 3 weeks, that will end the drought. I asked him about that, and the subject of what we mean by drought came up.
I think there's something we could call landscape drought, which is like the plants and all that growing in the soils and the soils themselves. But the deeper groundwater things, that's a long haul to recover that. That's going to be decades of good management and additional precipitation.
It's been a great start to what we call the water year.
The National Weather Service's Alex Tardy agrees with Marty Ralph. Now we wait to see what happens over the course of the next couple of months. When it comes to drought-ending weather, Mother Nature has tricked us before. We've had those years where we'll get a lot of rain in December, maybe some in January, and then that's it. But Alex Tardy says this time it seems to be different. He says there are not only 1, 2, not even 3, but 5 atmospheric rivers lined up across the planet headed straight for California.
They're actually coming across Europe and Asia and across the Pacific, so we can actually track them.
Tardy and Ralph say the bulk of that rain is headed to central California, to a parched San Joaquin Valley that desperately needs it. Plus, the snowpack in the Sierra is already 120% of average. Of course, the flip side is concern about flooding and mudslides. But for now, the skies look to bring relief that may end what you might call the surface drought and get us closer to the years-long process of refilling huge reservoirs like Lakes Powell and Meade and recharging the state's depleted groundwater. John Carroll, KPBS News.
And those who keep track of just how many people are homeless in San Diego say they need help. The Regional Task Force on Homelessness plans to hold its point-in-time count 3 weeks from today. That's on January 26th. Organizers say they need more volunteers to ensure an accurate count. The number they come up with helps determine federal resources and how to prioritize efforts in the months ahead. More information is at rtfhsd.org. Critics of the Biden administration and its handling of immigration have been urging the president to go to the border, and in the coming days, he will do just that. Karen Kafa has more on the president's new focus ahead of a trip to Mexico.
President Joe Biden laying out new plans to stem a massive influx of migrants at the U.S. southern border that his Homeland Security Secretary said this week is straining the system.
I know it's a complicated issue. I don't want to pretend there's anything easy about it.
The U.S. will accept up to 30,000 migrants per month from Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti, and Venezuela in an expansion of the so-called humanitarian parole program. Those migrants must apply for U.S. entry before leaving their home countries. Those who do not come to the U.S. under that program may be expelled under Title 42, the Trump-era policy that allows immigration authorities to swiftly return some migrants to Mexico and remains in place after a Supreme Court order last month as legal challenges continue.
In the meantime, my administration will continue to use that authority as the Supreme Court has required.
Biden's remarks are ahead of a visit to El Paso, Texas Sunday, his first to the U.S. southern border as president and en route to a leaders summit in Mexico City where migration will be discussed. He called on Congress to pass sweeping immigration reform, arguing his executive powers can only do so much. It's an area where he faces criticism even from some border state Democrats, but especially the GOP. But right now, the House remains mired in an internal Republican fight over a speaker.
On the big stuff, we all agree, right? We want to secure the border. We don't want the executive branch to do everything through a pen and a phone.
Until a House Speaker is elected, no members of either party can be sworn in, no committees can be seated, and no legislation can be introduced. In Washington, Karen Kafa, KPBS News.
So how will that new policy affect our border region in the coming months? KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado spoke with people doing the work on the ground.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas started his news conference Thursday with what many already know. The Biden administration continues to prepare for the end of the border policy known as Title 42. But Mayorkas took a stance that seemed different.
Title 42 or not, the border is not open.
Then he announced a litany of new policy changes in an effort to try to control the influx of migrants from 4 countries the administration says has risen dramatically at the borders with no easy way to send them home.
Effective immediately, citizens from Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Haiti who attempt to cross our border without authorization will be swiftly expelled to Mexico.
Pedro Rios, the director of the American Friends Service Committee in San Diego, says he's not surprised the administration is trying to take this tough new stance.
The larger picture here is that the Biden administration knows that it has lost the ground on the border rhetoric. And as they're looking for 2024 in the presidential elections, the Biden administration wants to look tough on border issues.
Since March of 2020, 2.5 million people have been denied asylum at the border. But Rio says our border will not look any different in the immediate future, and this new policy may make things worse.
What we've seen from the application of Title 42 is that it really has not had a significant impact on stopping people's intention to cross into the United States. So the likely scenario here will be that more people will become frustrated, desperate, and more apprehensions will likely take place. Migration will not stop.
He says the administration is failing to do what it promised to do on immigration because this policy will fail those who need protection.
For people that are stranded in Mexican border towns, the situation likely will become much more desperate for them because Mexican authorities and Mexican government does not meet their needs as well, and they face even greater dangers. It will benefit the few who do have the resources to make their way to the United States and not the larger majority who are likely waiting in border towns wanting to seek asylum but don't have an avenue through which to do that because the new rules will not allow it.
Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, Kevin McCarthy makes concessions but still fails to garner more support for his bid to become House Speaker. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A lawsuit against the industry leader for concert and event tickets is on hold. Ticketmaster and its parent company Live Nation are accused of fraud in how it handled ticket sales for the upcoming Taylor Swift tour. A judge has issued a temporary stay on the case, which includes hundreds of people who tried to buy tickets online. They are seeking $2,500 for every violation of California's unfair competition law. By now, most California taxpayers are supposed to have received middle-class tax refund payments from the state, but KPBS reporter Jacob Ayers spoke to some San Diegans who say they are still waiting.
The state's website says over 7 million direct deposits and 9 million debit cards have now been issued as part of California's middle-class tax refund. It's a one-time payment to provide relief to Californians who make less than $500,000 and filed their 2020 tax return by October 2021. But some Californians and San Diegans are feeling left behind.
At this point, I don't think I'm going to get it. I should have qualified to receive a direct deposit based on what they have posted on their website. And I tried calling for clarification, but it's not any more clear when you call and you can't talk to a person.
Carmel Valley resident Sonia, who didn't want to use her last name, said the rollout has been clunky and she's still waiting on her funds.
It's more about confidence in the government, in our California state government doing what they say they're going to do.
The payments range from $400 to $1,050 for couples filing jointly and $200 to $700 for other individuals, depending on income level and claim dependence. Sonia says she was supposed to qualify for direct deposit by November at latest, but she still hasn't received the money.
And I filed it on time, and I haven't moved in a very long time, so none of those variances would apply to my situation.
We reached out to Assemblymember Brian Mainshine, who represents Carmel Valley, where Sonia lives. He sent us this statement. This setback in distributing the middle-class tax refund should not be happening, and I'm sorry to hear that some have faced delays. I encourage any constituents of mine who have not received their payments to contact my office. The state's website has been updated to say that debit card recipients who changed their address since 2020 may now have to wait until mid-February to be mailed their payments. Jacob Ayers, KPBS News.
Our latest storm system is now exiting the area, and we'll see weather calming down overnight and for the next couple of days. So as we take a look at our weather headlines, drier conditions for Friday and Saturday, and the temperatures gradually warming up a little bit. And looking ahead to next week, well, it does look like the potential's there for some more wet weather early and then later in the week. For tonight, just a shower or two. Temperatures in the upper 40s. Looking around the area, you see just a couple of showers around. Bulk of the rain's done. And we'll see those temperatures on the cool side. 38 in Ramona, 32 in Mount Laguna. And you can see at Oceanside about 43 degrees. On the future satellite and radar, well, all the heavy precipitation has exited the area. So just some clouds, a couple leftover showers the rest of the night, and then tomorrow the drying continues. And looking at our weather for tomorrow, here you see it, drier, so we can catch our breath now between the storms. And here you can see our temperatures creeping up a little bit, low to mid 60s, 61 Oceanside, 64 El Cajon, Mount Laguna at 45. Saturday, another dry day. Well to the north, it's wet. And looking ahead to next week, well, the stormy pattern continues, starting off with the precipitation heaviest to our north, but we will see better chances for rain into Tuesday. Dry the next couple of days at the coast. Could see some spotty showers later Sunday to Monday, a little higher chance coming in on Tuesday. Same is true in the inland areas, maybe a shower or two here or there later Sunday into Monday. Better chance would be on Tuesday. And as we head our way through the mountains, you know, it's cool here. And better chances of precipitation early next week. And in the deserts, well, it looks like periods of clouds and sun, temperatures the mid to upper 60s. So it looks like our next best chance for significant rain probably holding off till early next week. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
Plastic waste that takes centuries to break down is a huge environmental problem for the Earth and its oceans. One answer to the problem is being explored in San Diego. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge shows us what two companies are working on.
Cardiff State Beach. Here, local surfers are catching plenty of waves. It's a nice, clean beach, but plastic waste isn't that far away.
Large parts of the Pacific Ocean are covered in floating plastic waste. And if you go to a windward beach where they don't clean it up right away, you'll see it washed up on shore in large quantities.
In El Salvador, it was a big rock beach with a lot of tidal flow. And you could tell that there was someone every day that was coming to pick up plastic bottles and flip-flops. And they were trying to clean it, but it was just a constant flow of plastics. And, you know, this stuff was piled up probably like mid-shin in El Salvador. It was pretty gross.
Cook isn't just a surfer. He's president of a company called Blueview Footwear that makes biodegradable sneakers. The science behind Blueview comes from their CEO, Stephen Mayfield, also a distinguished professor of biology at UC San Diego. Recently, Mayfield showed me his lab where pieces of the foamy material that go into his sneakers swirl in vials of liquid. The water is filled with tiny ocean organisms that are invited to eat the stuff.
As we're degrading our foams, we're also starting to isolate the organisms that biodegrade them. So what these are is we've thrown in, I don't know if you can see it sitting in there, but we've thrown in a little piece of our foam, and then these are actually organisms pulled out of the pier down here.
Biodegradable plastics that go into Blueview shoes are made from algae oil. Mayfield says it's ironic that ancient deposits of algae oil have become the petroleum that we mine and turn into plastic.
Yeah, it was super simple, right? It was like, plastics come from petroleum. Petroleum comes from algae. Let's make plastics directly from algae.
Mayfield says scientists who pioneered plastics 70 years ago could have created degradable plastics. But in an effort to make something very durable, they didn't foresee the problem with the plastic waste stream that is now so obvious.
So when we set about to redevelop these things, we said, let's make plastics from algae, but let's make plastics that biodegrade at the end of their life, where the material has a half-life that's proportional to the product.
Based on Mayfield's experiments, the shoes will fully degrade in soil and compost in about 9 months. In the ocean, it'll take about 2 years. These new plastics should have a warm welcome, given the outcome of plastic recycling. Many studies indicate less than 10% of plastic waste is recycled. Most recently, a Greenpeace report estimated only about 5% of household plastics are recycled in the United States. The San Diego company Gino has been bioengineering plant-based plastics for more than 20 years. Company CEO Christoph Schilling, who got his PhD at UC San Diego, says plastic recycling could work, but it requires a clean, pure stream of the same kind of plastic. And that's not what you find in your typical recycling bin.
In fact, most plastics cannot be recycled. So to be relying on plastics recycling as the solution to our plastics waste challenges, it can be a part of the solution, but we need to come up with other alternative approaches.
Gino's materials go into making nylon for apparel. They're also used to formulate cosmetics. A primary building block of their bioplastic products is sugar. Corn kernels, for instance, are packed with sugar.
Our technology is being used today at the core of a $300 million capital project to build a manufacturing facility in Iowa that will take corn produced from American farmers and convert that into a large volume chemical that makes materials that we will find in a range of different products.
Gino technology is being used to make biodegradable plastic bags at a plant in Italy, but many of the plastic materials Gino makes from plants do not degrade. Schilling says it's unrealistic to say we can phase out non-degradable plastics altogether. Mayfield with Blueview says he would never put degradable plastic in a boat that's constantly exposed to water.
But equally, it's kind of silly to make plastics that are going to last for 1,000 years and then put those into a car that might last 20.
Meanwhile, consumers and governments have choices to make about what kinds of plastic they will allow in the marketplace. A new California law signed last year says grocers must provide compostable pre-checkout bags, the kind you put your lettuce in, by 2025. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
And there's a lot more optimism in the recovery of Damar Hamlin. He's the Buffalo Bills player who collapsed on the field Monday night, prompting the NFL to postpone the game in Cincinnati. And doctors now say the 24-year-old can move his arms and his legs and that his mind appears to be in good shape.
First question that he wrote when he started to awaken was did we win? So we know that he's really, that it's not only that the lights are on, we know that he's home, and that it appears that all the cylinders are firing within his brain, which is greatly gratifying for all of us, for the nurses and the respiratory therapists and the care team that's been at his side.
Hamlin's heart stopped moments after making a tackle. Doctors say he still requires a breathing tube, which means that he can't carry on a conversation yet. For now, he remains in critical condition and in intensive care. New data from the county health department isn't showing a large spike in COVID or flu cases from the Christmas holiday. In fact, cases are trending down. However, it's still too early to tell if we'll see a bump from New Year celebrations. San Diego County Public Health Officer Dr. Wilma Wooten says the latest report brings good news, especially when it comes to COVID.
We can't rest on our laurels and just think because things are moving down now, we could have another small surge. And the surge that we saw so far has been small if you compare it to last year, the same time.
Wooten says the downward trends are likely because most San Diegans are now vaccinated. COVID hospitalizations are also lower than they were this time last year. She says we're likely on track to end the public health emergency late next month. California is among the states where major retailers will soon have access to abortion pills. CVS and Walgreens plan to carry the items in pharmacies where it's legal to do so. Some states have added restrictions since last year's reversal of the Roe v. Wade abortion case. A prescription is still required. A change in policy from the FDA eases a rule that only the pills through mail-order pharmacies or certain doctors and clinics. Day 3 of the new Congress looks a lot like days 1 and 2. Republicans who hold a majority in the House still can't come to an agreement on a new speaker. Chris Wynn is covering the latest from Washington.
Ahead of a third day of votes for House Speaker,
we're all working together to find a solution.
Republican Representative Kevin McCarthy of California arrived on Capitol Hill Thursday with cautious optimism, despite failing to get enough votes to secure the top job.
A speaker has not been elected.
Chaos surrounding the speakership as some began to lose patience with the drawn-out process.
Let's get this over with. Let's choose our speaker, get Kevin McCarthy, and let's start doing what we're supposed to be doing.
McCarthy's team started their day by negotiating with some of the initial 20 Republicans who voted against him. A very small minority of a slim majority. GOP hardliners who don't necessarily speak with one voice.
I will never vote for Kevin McCarthy.
Members must be sworn in before they can pass bills, perform oversight, or even set up services for constituents. Some can't even access sensitive and classified information as part of their committee assignments because they don't have clearance.
One of our 3 branches of government offline right now. That is a very dangerous thing for our country, and it cannot continue much longer.
The speaker fight, putting America's business on hold.
We as Democrats are ready, willing, and able to partner with them to find common ground whenever and wherever possible. Not as Democrats, not as Republicans, as Americans.
Chris Wynn, KPBS News.
Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI was laid to rest this morning at the Vatican. KPBS reporter Melissa May shows us how Catholics here in San Diego are remembering the late Pope.
Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI passed away on New Year's Eve in a monastery at the Vatican at the age of 95. Thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square as Pope Francis presided over Pope Benedict's funeral. This was the first time a pope presided over a mass for a predecessor who resigned. Benedict was the first pontiff in over 600 years to resign his position rather than hold office for life. He was laid to rest in the crypt under St. Peter's Basilica. In San Diego, worshippers braved the rain and gathered at St. Joseph Cathedral downtown for an afternoon service.
At the same time, we remember in a special way Pope Emeritus Benedict, who was a very to be brought today.
We're appreciative of his life,
of what he's done for the Catholic Church, his leadership, and we're sorry to see him go, but we know where he is.
We're happy to know that he received his eternal reward in heaven for sure.
David and Kathy Riley both said they loved Pope Benedict and were grateful for his teachings.
He had the rare combination of just extreme brilliance and humility. So for us, that was very attractive. He has an incredible amount of writings that really helped us as Catholics in growing in our faith.
He's such a gentle, wise shepherd who just devoted his entire life to God and to others, whether Catholic, or not.
Melissa May, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. We're expecting the first jobs report of the year. NPR's Morning Edition will tell us about the numbers for December and how the national job market closed out 2022. And KPBS Midday Edition will have an interview with San Diego County Sheriff Kelly Martinez as she begins her new position. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. By viewers like you. Thank you.